It is difficult to predict exactly which elements of the summary of Just Mercy would be most likely to be rejected by a conservative reader. We individualize collective problems in a dangerous way in society, and Bryan Stevenson lays out the case. And we can talk about mass incarceration, but the truly tragic thing is that we don't even have epistemic access to the real pain that is going on because the suffering of these people is hidden behind closed doors. Hey Chat GPT, summarize the book Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson. Let's see how it does. Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson is a memoir about his experiences as a lawyer, fighting against the death penalty and mass incarceration in the United States. The book focuses on Stevenson's work with prisoners on death row, particularly Walter McMillan, a black man who was wrongly convicted and sentenced to death for a crime he did not commit. Stevenson recounts the challenges he faced while working to exonerate McMillan and other innocent prisoners, including I want to stop already, but challenges he faced is really sanitized language. He was humiliated and threatened by police while he was attempting to do this, had guns pulled on him, was strip searched in prisons. Challenges he faced is like very PG compared to what actually happened, but let's keep reading. Including institutionalized racism, corrupt law enforcement, and an unjust legal system. He also explores the impact of poverty, childhood trauma, and mental illness on the criminal justice system. Throughout this book, Stevenson argues that the death penalty is racially biased, arbitrary, and often applied to innocent people. That is all correct, and he does an amazing and terrifying job of making that case. He advocates for a more compassionate, and back to the quote, he advocates for a more compassionate and rehabilitative approach to justice, one that recognizes the humanity of all people, regardless of their crimes. Actually, yes, one of the I don't talk too terribly much about my sticky tab system, but one of the blue stickies in this book is how he sort of single-handedly pushed and pulled my moral intuitions around rehabilitative justice and treating everyone, even people who do horrible things, like people in the justice system. Final sentence. Just Mercy is a powerful and eye-opening account of the flaws and injustices in the American criminal justice system and an inspiring call to action to reform. Whoa. We can talk all day about AI ethics and whether or not this robot is going to take my job, and honestly, I will talk about this. This sounds really sophisticated. It could have been pulled from a Wikipedia article. This is like somebody wrote a version of this, and it just sort of copied and pasted it in here with a little bit of edits. I'm being a little bit glib. We can talk. I have spent a fair amount of time trying to figure out like the under the hood mechanisms for how these machines work. We'll talk about that in other videos. But before we do that, I want to ask a different question at it for a couple of reasons. I don't know why I'm being vague about it. Let's just go. Hey ChatGPT, which elements of this summary would be most likely to be rejected by a conservative reader? Now, I'll just read it and then I'll editorialize. It is difficult to predict exactly which elements of the summary of Just Mercy would be most likely to be rejected by a conservative reader, as individual beliefs and values can vary widely. Sorry, I've literally so many lines. Okay, however, some elements of the book that may be more controversial or challenging for conservative readers could include bullet point list, baby. Love a bulleted list. The assertion that the death penalty is racially biased, arbitrary, and often applied to innocent people. The exploration of the impact of poverty, childhood trauma, and mental illness on the criminal justice system, which could be seen as excuses for criminal behavior. The call for a more compassionate and rehabilitative approach to justice, which some conservative readers may view as too lenient on criminals, and the focus on systemic issues in the criminal justice system rather than individual responsibility for crimes. And then there's like a little cover your ass thing at the end. It's important to note that these elements are not inherently political, and readers of all political persuasions may have varying opinions on the issues raised in Just Mercy. Okay, sure. Thanks, robot. Appreciate you. Let's talk about it line by line. I cited this in my previous video on Malfoy's Mudblood Ethics. In page 29 of this book, there is a footnote that explains the year 2000 and in the year 2011, there were multiple polls of different demographic groups of conservatives in the United States asking whether or not they thought interracial marriage should be legal. That's 2000 and 2011. That is right now. That's not like back in the good old days, back in the Rosa Parks days, back in the Malcolm X, Martin Luther King days. So ChatGPT's claim, right, that people would be upset at the idea that the death penalty is racially biased. Let me be more specific. Conservatives would reject the summary of this book based on their intuitions that the death penalty is they would reject the racial bias, arbitrariness, and application of the death penalty to innocent people. That really checks out, and that unfortunately is quite true. You are more likely to be executed if you are a black person in the United States. There are specific states where this is worse, some of the ones that you would expect, Mississippi, Alabama, etc. You are more likely to be killed for an offense if you are black. You are extra more likely to be executed by the state, state-sanctioned killing, if your crimes are against a white person. If you kill a white person, you're more likely to be killed by the state. And if you kill a black person, those statistics decrease. The exploration of the impact of poverty, childhood trauma, and mental illness on the criminal justice system could be seen as excuses for criminal behavior. Absolutely, I've heard this line of rhetoric in conversations with people in person and online. But what we know is that poverty increases violent crime. This shouldn't surprise us, right? We literally write musicals and books about it, right? The Les Mis is like about a theft that happens as a result of desperation. The main one that I want to reference here, actually I read this when I was in like 2013. This book is called America's Four Gods by Freese and Bader, and it taught me a little bit about the moral intuitions around individual accountability. Conservatives are likely to blame individuals for things that are often social scale problems. So we know from Bryan Stevenson's work, from various psychologists' work, from Jennifer Eberhardt's book, and from Dorothy Roberts' book, that the impacts of poverty on the body are real, and the impacts of poverty on behavior are real. Conservative America often responds to these intuitions of individual responsibility to say that poverty is an individual problem. It is not, unless you're referring to the individuals that like profiteer from wage theft, right? Poverty is an individual problem insofar it is Jeffrey Bezos' problem, as far as it is Elon Musk's problem. Like, people exploit communities. That's what creates poverty, and we have a legal structure that allows this. That's the only framing in which poverty is an individual problem. It's much more responsible to think of poverty as a collective problem. And I know I keep pulling books off shelves, but one of the people that really truly convinced me of this is Heather McGhee, author of The Sum of Us. This book treats the alleviation of poverty not as like something we need to do to, like, government needs to help with poverty because it's been bad individual choices that have been made by people, but instead thinking of poverty as thinking of solving poverty as an investment in society. Let me give you just a couple of details. If you educate someone and then they have a better economic outcome and then they are not incarcerated, that is an investment in society that pays off. I don't know how hard I have to work to back up that claim, but like, think through the logic of it. If someone becomes a productive member of society, instead of having no access to resources and then starting to commit crimes, we don't have to pay to police them, we don't have to pay to incarcerate them. It's an investment in society. The same is true for a lot of the things that people are afraid of spending money on. Giving people health care isn't a handout. It helps society function. Do you think you can work if you're in a hospital? No, it is not possible. Healthcare is an investment in society. And against the counterintuitions, like, we'll get back to Chat GPT's, imagining what conservatives would say in response to this. Even housing is one of the things that helps society. It's hard to get a job when you don't have a house, but investing in housing systems that are good, giving people houses, pays off because they become productive members of society. Productive members of society being a thing with many asterisks that we can talk about in other videos, because I have many economic thoughts on like that, but we'll just roll with it. So pulling it back to our ChatGPT quote, right? The exploration and the impact of poverty, childhood trauma, and mental illness on the criminal justice system, which could be seen as an excuse for criminal behavior. We individualize collective problems in a dangerous way in society. And Bryan Stevenson lays out the case. And he doesn't just do that from a theoretical perspective. As a really good attorney and as a really good person, he speaks with Rosa Parks, he speaks with activists, but he doesn't just hang out with fancy people. He befriends and is proximate to the people that he is working with. This man works in poverty. He knows the people. He's not coming at it from the outside, he's coming at it from the inside. I discussed proximity in my most recent video. Malfoy is made and not born, which is quite related to what we're discussing here. But Stevenson does an extremely good job of laying this out. Bullet point 3, the call for a more compassionate and rehabilitative approach to justice, which some conservators may view as too lenient on criminals, and the focus on systemic issues in the criminal justice system rather than the individual responsibility for the crimes. Okay, if I'm being honest, as like a writer, as like a former teacher, some of these bullet points are actually redundant. He's referring to like individual responsibility as a moral framework in multiple bullet points, like basically all of them. So it feels like 4 claims, but it's actually fundamentally 1 claim, which is individual people are responsible for mass incarceration, which again is a bonkers mindset unless the individuals that you're targeting are prison profiteers, people who are making money from prison labor, for instance. So running out of time, I want to just conclude on a couple of things here. Pausing to read, sorry. It totally misses the entire arc of juvenile sentencing, and that is an important arc to miss. Bryan Stevenson and his team brought cases to the Supreme Court to get laws about juvenile sentencing changed in this country. It was possible to sentence a 16-year-old to life without parole in this country prior to Bryan Stevenson's work. I bring that up because there are bright spots, right? It's not all doom and gloom. And if you do the work of truth-telling and you do the work of collective systemic change, working through the system sometimes and in culture sometimes, he has an entire memorial dedicated to lynchings, for instance. Another element that was sanitized away from the summary of this book. If you don't want to read the book, watch the movie with Michael B. Jordan. And if you don't want to watch the movie, read the book. Finally, that's a sad way to end the video. Walter McMillan's case is not as happy as this summary from Chat GPT would make it seem. He does get him out of prison, but the experience traumatizes him in a way that no amount of financial compensation can really make up for. And that ultimately is part of what is tragic about the system that we have. It's not that there are, mass incarceration means there's too many people in jail. Like, that claim is so sanitized, it's so abstract. That's one of the things that Elie Wiesel says this. And I'll throw this up here and then I'll read it for you. We must not see any person as an abstraction. Instead, we must see in every person a universe with its own secrets, with its own treasures, with its own sources of anguish, and with some measure of triumph. Elie Wiesel. We can talk about mass incarceration, but the truly tragic thing is that we don't even have epistemic access to the real pain that is going on because the suffering of these people is hidden behind closed doors. And we as emotional, moral, and philosophical decision makers can't even make all the right choices because we don't even have access to the data of these people who are suffering. And that is a tragedy. But Bryan Stevenson does have a small slice of access to that information because he is in jail talking to children and adults alike who have been incarcerated wrongfully and whose lives are being threatened by the state. I cannot recommend this book enough. It is hard to read, but it is worth the emotional and intellectual investment of your time. I know not everyone has disposable time. We just spent a bunch of time talking about poverty, so I know not everyone can read this book. I think the second best thing that you can do is you can watch his Johns Hopkins speech, which I cited in my previous video. I will also link that below, and it is also worth your time. I gotta go. I'm Charlie. This is That Makes Sense to Me. I try to interpret and summarize the books that you don't have time to read. If you're still sticking around and you haven't hit the like button, the subscribe button, you could maybe do that, or if you want to leave a comment, also like that. I don't know how to do this whole YouTuber thing necessarily, but I'm working on it. And the best way to support me is by buying these books through the affiliate links or by joining on my Patreon. Patreon's more direct and a better use of your money, and you can get it from the library. Enough thoughts. I don't want to end this note on a cheery note. I don't want to end this video on a cheery note because it is truly a somber book. But thanks Chat GPT. Thanks to whoever wrote the Wikipedia article that got sliced into that. We'll talk more about that in future videos. I have lots of stuff planned about that. Bye.